we're talking today about retaining great people. What are motivators and demotivators? So, why is it important to retain great people? Well, look, there's the obvious reasons. They're great. You need to actually keep them in the business. But more than that, great people motivate others. If you've got a bunch of really good people, the others will come up to match. But if you've got a bunch of really mediocre, average people and maybe one who's really great, that tall poppy will get pulled down. So you want to actually encourage and grow those great people because they will actually lift up the rest of the team. And that greatness reflects well on your brand. And the bottom line for the vast majority of us, that our people are our brand and they are the people who are out there. And one of the last but most important reasons why it's important to retain great people is customers will remain loyal to that person. So one of the things you need to think about within your structure is, if you've got those great people, then making sure that the customers create a loyalty, not just to Lisa or Cherie or whoever, but they retain a loyalty to your company. So when Lisa leaves, then they don't just go with Lisa. So thinking about how you're actually structuring your business to make sure that client relationship remains with the company and has multiple touch points. So I'm going to go with the demotivators first. So what are demotivators? Well, a perceived lack of money. Now, I'm going to come back to this one in quite a lot of detail of this perception of lack of money, because it is a really big thing. And yes, at the end of the day, the pay discussion will always come up and everybody's always going to want more, but you can't necessarily afford to pay it. And particularly at the moment, there is a reality to the fact that I am doing a lot of restructure and redundancy work. And yes, I am doing a recruitment at the moment, but yes, for that one recruitment, I'm doing 10 restructures and redundancies. So, the money isn't out there for companies to up the ante on the wages. Lack of recognition. Now, one of the we're going back to the 1950s, 1960s, the Hawthorne studies, but the bottom line is that those are still very valid and relevant. And basically, the vast majority of human resource theory and all the rest of it is based on the principles that were discovered at that point. And the Hawthorne studies, very briefly, was a study that they did in factories whereby they were testing lighting and all the rest of it, heat, what actually got greater productivity out of the staff. The bottom line was what they discovered was that the participants in the program, in the study, that recognition of being involved in the study was actually the greatest motivator for them. Lack of resources. At the end of the day, if you're asking people to work really fast, really hard, etc., but you're not giving them the resources to do the job, that becomes frustrating. So, if you can't actually deal to the resources, if you can't necessarily afford the resources, how do you do workarounds or how do you adjust your expectations on staff so that you're not pushing them to achieve more but with substandard materials? A big one, demotivator, lack of actions or decisions by management. Your staff will see what is going on in the company. They will know that they are sitting around twiddling their thumbs and they'll be getting nervous. And particularly in the current economy, they will be starting to think they know that they're not busy. They know that the work isn't coming in the door. And if they're not seeing any action or decisions by management, or they're seeing somebody who is swinging the lead and nothing is being done about it, they will be getting nervous and they will be looking elsewhere. And your best staff will find other jobs quickest. and taking advantage of them, overloading those guys who are actually your really good staff. You overload them because you know they'll do a good job, but ultimately, that's actually taking advantage of them. You need to be dealing with the people who are not pulling their weight rather than just and giving the people who are pulling their weight the support that they need rather than just taking advantage and overloading them. So I'm going to touch on the perceived lack of money. Now, I've had a look at some of the statistics. Now, in 2013, this was when living wage was introduced. So that's why I picked 2013. That point in time, the minimum wage was $13.75. Living wage at that point was $18.40, only 34% higher. And median wage was $20.22, i.e., 47% higher than minimum wage. Now, fast forward to 2025, minimum wage is up by 71% on the 2013 rate. Living wage is now 18.8% higher than minimum wage, and it's up by 57% on 2013. And median wage, I was a bit surprised at this one because certainly this seems to have caught up again. It's up 42% on minimum wage, and it's up 66% on 2013. Now, certainly during COVID, we saw some very aggressive increases in minimum wage, but the guys who are sort of the slightly higher level weren't getting the increases, and you ended up with this crashing of the space between minimum wage and median wage. I'm glad to see that that has balanced out and it's started to rise again. Now, that all sounds, fairly on par. But the CPI increase from 2013 to 2025 was 37.5%. Now, if you have a look at those percentages, obviously CPI has not gone up nearly as much as the minimum wage and the living wage and the median wage have gone up. But housing has increased by 111%. So this is a big cost within our, what's going out of your household income. But we also have the third highest minimum wage in the world. Number one is Luxembourg, number two is Netherlands, we're number three, and Australia is number four. So we have a very high minimum wage, we have a high living wage, etc., etc. So why are our housing prices so high? In New Zealand, house price, the house to income ratio is 17.6 or 17.6, which is just below the UK. Australia is 14.3, so our housing is more expensive. We're considered the 7th most expensive place to buy a house in the world. Now, it was like, yeah, well, there was an interesting one. Some friends of mine had put a house on the market, their house down in Auckland, and it was a 3-bedroom detached house, and it was being listed as a first home buyer. And I'm looking at this going, my God, I remember my first home, which is a 45 square meter flat, 2-bedroom flat in Edinburgh. It's certainly a 3-bedroom semi-detached or detached house was, family home, third or fourth house. And the average house size, though our average house price in New Zealand is much higher than the UK, the average house size is 82.7 square meters in the UK versus 196.8 square meters. And the new granny flats, the new rules that are coming out next year about what's a property that doesn't even need consent, is 70 square meters. Now, if you think about that, 70 square meters versus 82.7 square meters in the UK is the average house size. So we're building big, and bigger houses cost more money. So there is absolutely a perception about what is the minimum standard that you require, and there is availability of stock. So, we're not building small houses. We're not building cubes in New Zealand unless you go for a tiny home. Tiny homes, I'd say that there's quite a few tiny homes that are bigger than 82.7 square meters. Credits here on New Zealand Stats and one roof survey. So why do we have this perception that we have a lack of money and that we need more money and that we're underpaid and all the rest of it? Well, the media's got a huge part to play in this. We're constantly being told that we're in crisis. There's a housing crisis. There's a doctor's shortage. There's a this crisis, that crisis, the other. So we're constantly having this reinforced that the cost of living is a disaster and all the rest of it. If you actually look at the costs of how much food has increased versus minimum wage, actually it's not nearly as much as what the wages, the median and the minimum wage have increased. But we're constantly being told that it's all doom and gloom. Our expectations of what is a minimum standard. So our expectations are the 200 square meter house, the $1,000 iPhone, the obviously I'm not living to minimum standard if I don't have Sky TV, Netflix, and Spotify on demand. Actually, I think back to when I was growing up, I know, showing my age here, is what my expectations were. Those were luxury items. Now it's a standard of what is a minimum standard. Co-workers. So why do people have the perception within the workplace that they are underpaid? So co-workers being paid more, even if it's only $1 an hour. Well, why are they getting more? So as soon as that they may be being paid well, or there may be good reasons why that person is paid more. It could be historic. It could be they've got a specific skill set. But if they are getting paid more money, that will immediately create a perception that the person who's being paid less is underpaid. Or the other one is people who are being paid the same for less effort. And that's a major demotivator for people. Job ads offering more. So, I do, when I'm recruiting, I do get a lot of people who are applying for jobs simply in order to use that get a job offer, to use that as a negotiation to go back to the boss and say, oh, I've just been offered this amount. So it is a perception, but it is there is reality to this. And why do people get a perception that they're underpaid? Being asked to do more without recognition. So that's some of our demotivators. So what motivates people? What gets people to stay with your business? The big one, recognition. Actually being acknowledged for doing a good job. And one of the keys here is to, you have the person who's very good at shouting from the rooftops, oh, I've just achieved this, I've just done that. And then you've got the little quiet person in the background who's just working away, doing their job, doing it awesomely, but you kind of forget about them. So we do tend to focus our noise and our time and effort and all the rest of it and focusing on those who shout loudest. And often those who shout loudest are actually not the ones who are actually doing the work. So making sure you're recognizing everybody's input. Reward. And I'm talking about non-fiscal reward. So the giving somebody a voucher to say, hey, great job, here, go and have a massage, or here's a bunch of flowers, or here's a chocolate fish. Actually, a chocolate fish, for all that it only costs you $1, it's one of the biggest motivators because it's actually about saying, hey, you did a great job, and here, I'm going to give you a prize for it. Job completion. So one of the things of somebody's doing a job, they're entrenched in doing something, is actually seeing that job through to the end, getting it completed. That gives you a really good warm fuzzy of getting a job completed. I had, I've been going through a fairly rough negotiation recently, and finally got the um, employee to sign off, and they've agreed the settlement, and we're done and dusted. I tell you, I was bouncing around the house cheering about that because it was just such a great feeling of completion of what had been quite a tough negotiation. Um, Achievement, actually getting things done. So there's some jobs where, if you're doing accounts, you're doing data entry, are you ever at the end of it? And, if you're not ever at the end of it, how do you actually celebrate when somebody's at the end of it? It's like, right, okay, so we've got to month end 2 days early. Awesome. Everything is inputted. And celebrating that. Yes, okay, fine. You've got to start the next month, the following day, but actually celebrating those achievements, however minor they may appear. And big motivator are your co-workers and your bosses. It's the people. And we join jobs for a vision, we stay for the people and the interaction that we have with people, but we leave because those things have disappeared for whatever reason. Now, it is something that's very difficult within, particularly if you're working on a remote basis. And I know that for some of you are on this call, you do have workers who are working remotely. So how do you keep engaged with them and keep them motivated? And so, making sure that you aren't just calling them when something's gone wrong, that you are actually having the positive discussions and the negative discussions, that you're actually creating and engendering some kind of collaboration between your co-workers. So even if they're working remotely, that you're having a regular daily or weekly team catch up via Zoom or Teams or whatever. Um, and try, even with the working remotely, try and have that by face to face, via video conference rather than just by phone. It does by talked in other things in the courageous conversation. I talk about how we take on information and how much of our information is to do with the words versus the facial expressions, etc., and that body language. So, good morning, how you doing? Or good morning, how you doing? Same words. Yes, there was a bit extra tone that I put in there, but my body language also told you a lot about what was going on there. And responsibility and trust. These are big motivators. Feeling that trust is lost for whatever reason, that's a major demotivator. But giving people that responsibility, that trust, etc., is really important, that they feel that they are trusted by the organization. So, how can I make this work in my workplace? Um, End-to-end job ownership. So looking at how you're structuring the job. Is it a case of, you've got this person does that bit, then that bit, then that bit, and it kind of gets passed on so people aren't involved from beginning to end? Can you structure things differently so that they are actually involved from the beginning to the end? Even if they're not doing the whole job. So it might be that one person is involved in the actually, a good example here would be a charity that I work with. And for them, they have, you've got the data entry and all the rest of it. And then you've got the end result. They work with children. And then you've got the people at the other end who are actually meeting the children, meeting the people who the benefit is for. And so what we're looking at and what we've been doing is actually enabling those people who are involved at the beginning, at the data entry, at the behind the scenes stuff, to actually meet those kids that they're working for. And that's been a huge motivator. Such a simple thing, but it's really easy to fall in behind your computer screen and not really remember who it is you're doing this for. And that's actually been a huge motivator for them. Um, Not micromanaging. So micromanaging is, it's one of those things, it very quickly takes away trust. And trusting your staff, but also monitoring. Look, the reality is that usually by the time I get involved, things have gone skelly. So you need to, and things haven't been monitored, things have been allowed to get away with, and that sort of thing. And so, you shouldn't have been given that trust, been giving them that trust. So by the time, you're calling me, they've gone well off track. And actually, if you've been doing a bit of monitoring up front, you might have spotted some of those issues or some of those signs that things were going wrong. And remember as well, it's about trusting your staff. But if you've got one who is not pulling their weight, you're demotivating the ones who are pulling the weight. So monitoring is making sure and protecting those who are pulling their weight. Chocolate fish, it is absolutely one of the biggest motivators. It's just that public recognition. But it does need to be genuine and not just to a schedule. So the employee of the month, um, can end up becoming a bit of a, oh, well, whose face hasn't been up on the employee of the month plaque for a few months? Okay, fine, Fred wins because we haven't posted Fred this month, or Fred for the last 6 months. Well, we might not have posted Fred as employee of the month because Fred's been a lazy little toad. And so giving Fred recognition as employee of the month, yeah, that's going to piss off the rest of your staff. But if somebody genuinely does a good job, recognize it, celebrate it, give them the chocolate fish, the pat on the back. And consistency of recognition and rewards. So consistency, and I'm talking about, so I say not to schedule, but consistency to recognizing everybody within the team, not just the one who shouts from the rooftop every time they succeed in making a cup of tea successfully. Making sure that you are actually recognizing those little quiet ones in the background. And for some of them, they're not necessarily going to want the public praise. They might be equally happy with the, or even more happy with the chocolate fish left on their desk with a little note saying, thanks for a great job. That would just give them the warm fuzzies and go, yay, thank you. But for some, yep, they absolutely want that public recognition. But what you don't want to do is to end up with the loud shouters always getting the recognition, and those people are actually working in the background, kind of getting ignored. And you need to think about what works for your team. So every company is different, every person is different. So ask your team what they want individually. So, I've got a company, it's an IT company, it's a very young workforce. They've just installed a games room. So they have a pool table in there, they have Subbuteo, they have all sorts of things, which, really works for them, motivator for them, etc. The guys really love it. It's quite a male-dominated workforce. Put that into a workforce where you've got a bunch of 50-year-old women, yeah, it's probably not going to actually be particularly attractive. So ask your staff individually, what would be a motivator for them? What would be a great reward for them? Yeah, the money thing's probably going to come out of there, but then remember that's back to the recognition, to the perception about that money. Yes, we'd all like more money in our back pockets, and yes, I'm just as bad as the rest of you or the rest of us for spending, $5 more than I really can afford. But That's just always the case. But there are things that will motivate me far more and will motivate everybody individually far more. One of the things that we do is canteen benefits are one of the options. So what canteen benefits are is where you have a set amount of money, say $500, that they can choose what additional benefit that they get over and above their basic salary package. And that could be a company funded mobile phone. It could be extra money to go onto their KiwiSaver. It could be extra annual leave. It could be help paying for childcare. There's all sorts of things, and you can be quite smart with canteen benefits because some of these things are actually tax deductible expenses. So they can go through as business expenses. So whereas you might pay for your own personal mobile phone out of your post-tax or your net pay, if it comes out as a company expense, it actually has a greater benefit because it's coming out as a pre-taxed benefit. So canteen benefits can be a really smart way of giving greater benefit for your individuals, for them to choose which benefit is really attractive for them. The games room we've touched on, will work for some companies, will definitely not work for others. What is the culture that you want to create? Do you want to create a Google, or do you want to create a calm Zen environment? The games room is definitely not going to work if you're running a spa, for example. And variety is key. So whatever you're looking at for your team, you're not going to please everybody all of the time. And so you need to make sure that you're offering a variety of recognizing and motivating staff in a variety of ways. Now I'm just going to touch briefly before we finish on dealing with negative news, because there is a reality to the fact that you want to, if you're having to go through a restructure or something like that, you still want to retain those really great staff, but through a time when you're actually going through some very negative stuff. So, have a look at the Courageous Conversation is one of the videos on the webinar. And, it's something that I talk about, and there's lots of information on the website. Deal with issues, don't ignore them. So if you've got somebody who's not pulling the weight in the team, deal with it. Be honest and respectful in terms of any dealings. If you are going through a restructure, be very honest about what's happening, why it's happening. Be open with people. Be respectful of their own emotional response and reaction. And your staff will know things are bad. Don't pretend that not. Don't bury your head in the sand, because that's going to create nervousness for them. If you're not acting, they know that something's wrong. They know that, you're squirreling away behind closed doors, or they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs because there's not enough work coming in. You need to be seen to act. You need to be seen to actually do something, not just play ostrich, because they're going to be sitting there going, well, if you're playing ostrich, are the liquidators going to walk through the door, and then I'm out of a job like that, and I may or may not get my final pay. And survivor management. So whenever you're going through a restructure, you're actually talking about, yes, this is the situation that we've got. Yes, this is what we're doing to right-size the business, to make sure that we're remaining viable, that those who are staying, those survivors, will have a job in 12 to 24 months. So making sure that your survivors are looked after. And in summary, look, people will grow and move on, and that's okay. You actually want to develop people, and you want them, and you should take that as a compliment, they grow and move on to the next thing. You can't provide them in any small business, you can't provide them with all of the career progressions that they need. You know, the most senior person might be a senior advisor within your business. Next stage up is the managing director. Well, you know, they're not going to take over managing director because that's your job and you are the owner and director of the business. So unless they buy the business, they're not taking that step. So if they want to take the next step up the ladder, they have to move on. So take the pat on the back for the fact that you've trained them well enough for them to be able to move on. But make sure you capture their knowledge en route. Don't create a single point of failure. It's easy to rely on that rock star, but you know, the danger is that if all the knowledge ends up being in the head of that one rock star, if that rock star then ups and leaves, all of that knowledge goes with them. So make sure that you have systems in place to capture the knowledge, particularly of your rock stars. Don't ignore the quiet ones. And people join a vision. They stay for the people, but they leave because those things apparently aren't there. And I put apparently because sometimes they will be there, but you're forgetting to actually celebrate them. You're forgetting to actually put that out there, and they're not necessarily seeing it. So, you know, you might be acting in the background, you might be talking about doing a restructure or dealing with issues, but if they're seeing that drift along for too long and you're taking too long to actually make decisions, then they're not going to see that that safety net is actually there. So our next webinar is on Friday, the 27th of June, motivating your team to work harder. So any questions? So I will stop my share and we can jump back to any questions.
Hey Lisa, thanks and good job as you always do. I was ready with the date for the next one, and you beat me to it with a slide. So well done. Get that in your calendar, guys. There's always so much insight. Even I don't employ anyone, but I certainly get value from these sessions, and if I did, then it'd be even more so. So thanks for joining. Good group of us here today, and it's great to see you guys coming along. Any last minute questions? I did pop in the chat just to get them in a few minutes ago, so we didn't have to hold you up too long, but nothing's come through, so good work, Lisa, as always.
And I just, before we go, Jordan, I just have to do one shout out.
Hey!
So thank you very much to NZ Audio Editors.
Check it out. We both got the same logo. I sent Lisa a t-shirt. If you like the t-shirts or you like dogs, then we can get a dog t-shirt to you, so...
No, I'm a pussycat person, so I got the pussycat.
There's got to be some people on the webinar who likes dogs. Get in touch. We'll get you a dog or a cat t-shirt. Thanks so much, Lisa. Love your work and look forward to seeing everybody on the 27th. Just remember it's been recorded, so if you missed anything, it'll be available in a few days to watch again.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, and thank you for coming along, guys.
Have a great weekend, everyone. See ya.
Cheers. Bye.